Daddy eats lots. Daddy eats lots. Daddy eats lots. Munch, munch, munch.
Hello and welcome to Daddy Eats Last, where you discuss the challenges of being a man in modern society and whatever the hell that even means. Matty is down with his Oma celebrating her birthday, so tonight is just myself, Kane, and Ryan. How you doing, Ryan?
Yeah, good, mate. Yourself?
Can't complain too much. How was your weekend?
Weekend was nice. Caught up with some friends for dinner on Saturday night. Played a bit of hockey today and hoping the Australians can turn around the cricket tonight.
Evenly poised. It's about to start. We're recording this at roughly 8 p.m. on the Sunday night, so it's just about to start on day 4 now, isn't it?
Yes. And I've got friends. I was catching up with a friend of ours had a birthday and did a birthday barbecue and caught up a bunch of guys that I play indoor cricket with, and there was about 5 or 6 little ones there as well. But all the guys were watching sport and just talking about cricket, and a bunch of them are heading over to England for the test at Lord's. So they all get on a plane in 5 days, which I'm pretty jealous about.
Wow, these are the guys who have kids?
2, yes. 2 out of the 4 do.
Wow.
So, and sure enough, so we're in Melbourne, and these are guys that I knew back from over in Perth. So he's flying off to Lord's for a boys' trip to watch cricket for 2 weeks. And his wife with 2 kids under 3 is also getting on a plane, but going back to Perth to spend time with grandparents and assistance from family.
Yes. I could understand that. That's hard yakka for everyone when one's away and there's no doubt a couple of kids, and that's something we discussed tonight at some point. I guess leading into that, my weekend yesterday, our little fella was what I would term not fit for human consumption. I turned on the monitor at 5:45 in the morning. I'm an early bird, so I'm at 5:45 even on the weekends. Turn the monitor on. We have the monitor on still just to basically just know when he goes to sleep, so we know how much sleep he's having. We don't leave it on during the night to see how he's going during the night, literally just to see how much he's had to sleep. Turn on at 5:45 in the morning and he's wide awake, not just kind of rubbing his eyes, about to wake up, like wide awake. Could have been awake since 3 in the morning, don't know. So when that happens, he's usually, and most people are the same. If they don't get enough sleep, they're a little bit on edge, maybe a little bit grouchy, one could say. So we spent most of yesterday at home, and then today we went out and explored the city down here in Melbourne. So that was our weekend.
Very nice.
Now, going back to episode 40 when you were away, Matty and I discussed the great things about having kids. So I thought tonight would be a really good one with Matty not being here to discuss the great things about not having kids. And my little fella's only 3.5, so I do have a vague recollection of pre-kid life, unlike Matty, whose kids are getting towards almost teenagers now, or no, they're sort of 6 or 7. So yeah, the great things about not having kids, mate, and I live vicariously through you a lot these days. So one of the great things about not having kids.
Well, I think when you guys were having that episode, I was gallivanting around Germany and Europe. So clearly, I was able to do that pretty freely. So we were over there for a wedding, and you guys were stuck here carrying the podcasting flag. There's great things about not having kids. Well, obviously it's hard to compare because I don't have the experience of having kids. And I am actually very pro kids. So I'm very pro having kids. So my partner, she will be quite happy that we're doing this podcast. Great things about not having kids, because she's wanting to push them away a little bit further, but I would actually love to have a couple ones. But I mean, I caught up with a friend of mine who was in Melbourne and met his daughter, and she was about 6 months old, and both of him and his wife are in Hobart, and they were up in Melbourne. And he basically summed it up, and I thought, oh, this is really interesting. He goes, there's life before and there's life after. And you will never do yourself you'll do yourself an injustice if you ever try and compare the two. They're just different. They're not better or worse. They're just different, and don't try and compare the two because they're so different, was what he was saying. And I suppose, if we take the weekend, for example, weekends are lovely without kids. I'm sure weekends are lovely with kids for all those that have kids, but my weekends consist of going out for a 3-hour dinner on a Saturday night and enjoying a bottle of wine and coming back and sort of relaxing, and then a sleep in the morning, and also then going out for breakfast or brunch, going and playing some hockey, and then basically watching football with a bunch of cricket guys. I went out on Friday night as well. I was invited to a business thing, which was a bit of a suit and tie event. And I guess one of the nice things is that, mind you obviously want to get the okay from the partner with all of these things. You kind of have a lot of freedom in terms of what you do. So yeah, your weekends are very, I play a number of sports. I ran a half marathon last weekend. There's a lot of things that will be much more challenging, I think, when we have kids.
Yeah. Do your siblings have kids at all? Or have you seen sort of kids growing up before? Because I know you've mentioned that you're quite keen on having kids. Have you experienced kids when you're of an age to understand, I guess, the work which comes along with them?
Yeah, a little bit. So neither of my siblings have kids because I'm the oldest of three.
Yeah.
But there is 9 years between my sister and myself. And on my father's side of the family line, I'm the eldest of all cousins. So, yeah, the eldest of all cousins, and have seen, I think one of my cousins he'd be about 4 or 5 now.
Yep.
And I'm 29 this year, so old enough to have actually been his dad. So I have seen or been around kids a lot, which I quite like, but I get the good, play with them part. But I do see especially now, friends of ours, we're at that age where everyone's sort of either getting married and having babies, or they're very much not, and they're traveling a lot. So it's sort of one or the other. But a number of our friends, probably in the last year or two, have all sort of had kids, and starting to see the differences of their lives pre and post, I guess.
Yeah, and that's good that you've experienced that in some way, because I know a lot of people go into sort of having kids almost flying blind and have no idea what to expect. And much like you, I was the eldest cousin on my dad's side. So, and I've got cousins who are just turning sort of 15, 16 now. So I've seen the full gambit as well. So it's one of those things, I think, that you kind of get some level of understanding. While you don't pay that much attention to how much hard work the kids are, you get some level of understanding from seeing it when you're that bit older. So I think that's a really important thing that you've kind of seen. I guess the other part is going back to my little fella not being fit for human consumption yesterday. If either you or TK woke up at 5:45 and hadn't had enough sleep on Saturday morning, the other one could just bugger off and ignore them for the rest of the day, where we had to kind of just piece together a day and completely change plans based on what we were going to do to what we ended up doing on the basis of the kid just not sleeping.
Yeah, I suppose when it's you're exactly right. If you don't get enough sleep, you become grumpy. I also have that same problem if I don't have enough food. I very much get hangry, but which a lot of my family and friends will attest to. But you're right. You sort of bugger off for a couple of hours where they can nap, or they're an adult so they can feed themselves or look after themselves, and you come back with a coffee and you kind of all is good. I imagine with a 3.5-year-old, you cannot do that.
Well, if only I did threaten him today in the car that I would leave him on the side of the road and come back in 15 years' time when he turned 18. This was the good day of the weekend where we pulled up in the city, and we couldn't get a car park, but we pulled over to try to work out what we're going to do next. And he tried to exit the car. So, and then it just kind of escalates from there. Well, I say exit the car. He's seat belted into his baby seat, but he can pull on the door now. So he pulls on the door and it kind of becomes ajar. So yeah, it's even the good days, you just get moments where you're just like, man, just dude, what are you doing? Like it just doesn't make any sense sometimes, this kid stuff. But yeah, that ability to kind of up and go and do what you want and not having kids is sort of a priceless thing.
I think that's the biggest thing. Like if I think about that question of what are the good things for not having kids is just genuinely the freedom that you do have. I speak to a lot of people who have kids, or like, we're now engaged, and you get all that. The first question that comes is, when's the wedding? The second question that presumably follows is the children piece. And
TK is going to get that so much worse than you.
Yes, she already does.
Yeah.
Which is wonderful because we're only at the start of the finishing line. But I think there's quite a bit more travel that we want to do.
Yeah.
And it's genuinely now becoming a thing of timing it before kids. Like, which trips would you do before, which trips would you do after? Because the more people that we speak to, like, and TK is very lucky in that she works at a great job at Seek, but who she works with and the level that she works she works with people that are much older than we are. Well, not much, but 5, 10, 15 years older. And they all they have kids and they all have that piece, and they all talk about their international stints or their days before children, or, when we say, oh yeah, we're off to Germany for a friend's wedding, they're all like, oh yes, and you're having a couple of weeks travel around, and they're just like, yeah, you just can't do that with kids. So I think that's the biggest thing that I hear from parents is they just turn around and are like, travel and the movement of, if you want to just move state or move job or move whatever it is, suddenly becomes a significantly different equation when you have kids, and then multiplies exponentially when you have more than 2 kids or 3 kids or 4 if you've got that much energy.
And crazy if you got 4, crazy. But my partner was listening to episode 47, which is you talking about your bucket list, and one of the bucket list items was traveling around the US. And I made the comment, I should be doing that one before kids. Offhand comment. She cracked up laughing at it when she heard that, because she's like, oh yeah, there's no way in hell you could really try to do that when you've got a kid. And even on Friday we caught up for lunch, and it was a beautiful lunch. We went out, had a drink after that, and I could have conceivably kept on going and stayed out for another 3 or 4 hours. And pre-kid I would have been, oh, I've got nothing else which I really need or want to do. But I'd already promised my little fella that I was going to spend some time in the afternoon with him. So I could have stayed there all afternoon with you, and I had to kind of just politely just sort of leave. So even the little things change a bit.
Yeah, it certainly would have been a fun Friday. But I mean, it was a fun Friday. But I think the other thing that sort of touches upon that I would say a good thing, not having kids, is you obviously have the freedom of time and to do what you want, so you can be a bit selfish. But with that also comes freedom of money, I would say. So you can kind of spur of the moment just go, I'm going to do this. Or, we do live very close to the city in Melbourne, so we're very fortunately lucky to have all these great restaurants and bars and everything around, and cafes and whatnot. And I certainly don't necessarily think twice, unless we're saving for something or whatever it happens to be, about whether we go out to dinner, or whether we, if we stay late at work and say finish at 6:37 one night or whatnot, it'll just be a couple of texts and it'll be like, we're just going to go here. And you don't really yeah, you just seem to have a bit more freedom with money, obviously, because you don't have a child who's dependent on it. And I hear kids are not cheap.
No, they certainly are not cheap. I think I made the comment today to either my partner or maybe to my little fella along the lines of, "You're not a cheap little man. Man, it's an expensive sort of expensive thing to bring up a kid." With all that you do and like all the things that you kind of, I guess, get done on a week by week basis, and uh, I know you're a really ambitious fella. Do you think you're ready to have kids soon? Like, have you thought about what the compromises to everything you want to achieve is as well?
Good question. I think it'll be hard.
Yeah.
I think the reason that I am okay for us not to have kids yet is because there is a trade-off on that side of things. And I don't necessarily want to make that trade-off yet. But then I also have the conflicting side where I also want to be a young-ish, and I say young-ish because I'm getting a bit older now, but I also want to be a youngish dad as well. So it's kind of that balance of, and probably the third piece is you don't know what you don't know. So there's probably a fair bit of naivety of me thinking that even when we have kids, I'm still going to be able to achieve a lot of things that I want to. Maybe that's just backing the work ethic that I have, and just going into it knowing that it's going to be like the first 5-6 years or whatever is going to be just absolute madness with work, and a kid. But yeah, it's probably one of the things that's meaning in terms of the ready to have kids. Logically, I would say no, not yet.
Yeah, I was talking to my wife about the conversation we had on Friday about ambition and how things change, and then next year that our little fella will be going to kinder, and I'd have a little bit more time. And you were like, "What are you going to do with that?" And I didn't really have an answer. I was speaking to my wife about it today, and she goes, "Well, first thing, you're not going to work every night and on weekends." I'm going, "Well, yeah, that's a good point. Like, I'll be able to push my work back into what would be a traditional sort of work period, because at the moment I work sort of weird and wonderful hours. Little fella will go to bed at 7, and I'll almost always, even on some weekends, jump back on the computer and do some work." So yeah, the way you and that's my choice. Like, I choose to do these things, and you don't have to choose that. There's lots of people out there who choose to parent a different way, and every way is potentially the right way of parenting. So you don't necessarily have to curb your ambition. You just have to maybe be a little bit more, I guess, realistic on what it will mean to you and what your day could look like.
Yeah, I think I've been fortunate to, and especially with the changing roles of men and women, and how much more, and rightly so, I think, how much more involved men should be in terms of the household domestics and the kids and bringing them up and that kind of thing. Thankfully, I do think workplaces and the work environment's changing towards that way, but I don't think they're changing quick enough. But yeah, I think I've been blessed with a couple of mentors who have been really successful who all have children. And they do say that there's periods where you need to compromise, that your goal and ambition will be slower. So they say your goal and ambition may not change, but there's periods where, like when kids go to high school or, especially finishing school and whatnot, you can really ramp up again when kids go to school as opposed to when they are at home. So a couple of mentors of mine have kind of gone, expect to not coast is probably the wrong word, but sort of just maintain a level that you're at when you have a kid. So don't necessarily expect for exponential growth and those kind of things, and then use your time smart. So then when the kid goes to school or whatnot, there's I guess ways to play around with it is what they've told me, but the fundamental comes down to it's a whole lot harder, and just sort of going in knowing that, if anything, just gives you a bit of peace of mind knowing it. Doesn't make it any easier, but you at least are a bit more mentally prepared of you're going to basically lose all your own time, because your time will be consumed by your work life, and then your time will be consumed by your family life.
Yeah, and I guess even with that, you get males get lead time as well. Like we don't have to carry the kid around for 9 months before giving birth as well. So yeah, even that 9 month period leading up to having a kid, as a male supporting your partner who is pregnant, there's a change involved there as well, because obviously dynamics change in what they can and can't do, especially later on in the pregnancy when they sometimes they just struggle to get out of bed. Like it can be quite hard sometimes just kind of deal with that. So it is a really big challenge. It's really rewarding at the end of the day, but yeah, it's like living a completely different life to before and after. So yeah, sometimes envy is not the right word, but sometimes I look back and all the things you're doing, I'm like, wow, it is like a completely different world.
I think that one of the best things, and it's probably why we're holding off for kids just that bit longer, is going in with it knowing that it's going to change, and that it's consciously, because if we're talking about good things of not having kids, you are selfish. Essentially, you're selfish on your career because you can be. You're selfish on what you want to do because you can be. You're selfish on you've had a couple of drinks with a few friends and the night escalates into a long night or whatever it happens to be, and you can kind of do that. Whereas obviously much more challenging, so when you've got a family at home and knowing what you're putting your partner through and those kind of things. So I think I don't know that it's necessarily good to be selfish, so that's probably not the best thing to be saying, not having kids.
But if there's a time to do it, now's the time to be that, I guess, that little bit selfish. And if you're ever that much of a jerk, TK will pull you up on it anyway. So I don't think you have anything to worry about.
Oh, without a doubt.
With regard
to her and my mum, there's no chance.
Yeah. So I wouldn't worry about that. If there's ever a time to be a little bit selfish, it is before you have a kid, because afterwards it's not impossible, but most people find it more difficult, I think.
Yeah, that's what I've seen with friends and that kind of thing. I think it's just the good thing about not having kids is your focus is, I would say, more narrower.
Yes.
Our focus is, what is our goals to achieve? What do we want to do work-wise? Where do we want to go travel? What do we want to see? What adventure do I want to do? Don't know that you can hike a 2-year-old up to base camp. So that's obviously challenging when you have a child. Well,
especially if you're going to run a marathon on base camp. When Steve Smith's just brought up his 50 in the Ashes, so it's still only no wickets this morning. So far so good in England.
Fantastic. But yeah, I think it fundamentally just boils down to, you can have what you want and you're solely responsible for it. So if you don't have what you want, you have the mechanisms to change that. That's probably the good thing about not having kids, is that you can do all those fun things that you may enjoy doing. But then I'm kind of, and like I said, I don't know the two sides to the equation, but I'm kind of banking on, there's a reason why most people, have kids and love and adore their kids and that kind of thing. And there's got to be a reason that my mum had 3 of them. So I'm sort of banking on the fact that there's something when you have a kid, and you hear it all the time from people, where you just go, you find a love that you've never understood before, or it's the toughest thing you'll ever do, but it's the most rewarding thing you can ever have done.
I think all of those are right, and it's different for every person. But at the same time, I can completely understand, especially from TK's perspective, why she is wanting to push it back a little bit, because inevitably a lot more changes for the female giving birth. So yeah, I can completely understand that. And hey, you guys are still young. Have fun while you can.
Yes, I think as much as I do want to be a young parent, we're trying to get that fine balance between maximizing child-free time and really just capitalizing on that, and then and hopefully doing that enough so that when we do have children, there's no, we didn't actually, you know, I think one of the risks when people don't have children is they can also waste that time very easily.
Yeah, that's a very, very good point. I guess a good place to wrap it up for this week on Daddy Eats Last. Do remember to subscribe to Daddy Eats Last on iTunes if you haven't already. And while you're there, please leave a review. Also, tell your mates about the podcast, especially if they are guys. Most of all, thanks for listening. We'll be back next week for another episode, or should I say serving, of Daddy Eats Last. How's that for a dad joke? Catch you next week.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.